Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Ask Professor Paranormal with me, Lloyd Auerbach, parapsychologist. I see familiar folks, Lucas, Paul, Susanna. Hi there. Hi, everybody else who's here, and hopefully we'll have a few more people coming in. I know it was a little bit longer break, but hope you all had a good Memorial Day weekend. Uh, did need to skip last week for a bunch of reasons, but we'll be back on we are back on an every other week schedule at least through August, if not longer than that. Hi, Day. Uh, so, a couple things I thought I'd start out with. One of which is that you may or may not be aware. I think I may have talked about this before. There is a website called Paranormal Daily News, run by Jock Brokus, and there's a number of us. I'm technically on the editorial board, and I'm going to here's the link in the chat, actually. For a couple of reasons, it's a good idea to go there and explore and actually go back every once in a while, maybe sign up for some notices that when they put up new material. There's going to be articles. There are articles on parapsychology, on UFOs related stuff, and a number of different areas. And they're also, I had a long conversation with Jock on Friday. Going to be starting, well, first a magazine. There'll be a digital magazine called Parawise, so it'll be coming out very soon. And there's also going to be a journal. So he wants to start we have the magazine and then an actual academic journal with peer reviewers and the whole bit. The magazine will have plain articles. The other one will have more academic, maybe not as academic as some of the true, the high level scientific journals, but more like the Journal of Scientific Exploration, and just giving one more chance for an open access journal publishing people's articles, and hopefully where you don't have to wait months and months for a newer issue to come out. So definitely dive in there. There's also a community you can join for free, and a directory if you happen to be somebody who has a paranormal group. So there's a directory you can do. One of the reasons I wanted to mention it, though, is every so often, more recently, I've been getting questions about the Telepathy Tapes podcast. The first season of which often covered Diane Hennessy Powell's work with autistic kids and telepathy. And it's taken a lot of pot shots. And for the show and what was presented on the show, good criticism, although, of course, highly skeptical. Turns out, and I know the research a little bit because Diane has presented at various Parapsychological Association conventions, that what was in the podcast was simplified, let's put it that way, and not as deeply into the controls that Diane had been putting on things for the last couple of years. So Craig Weiler, who is the science editor of Paranormal Daily News, just posted a couple of days ago an excellent and very in-depth discussion of the telepathy tapes, and specifically Diane Hennessy Powell's research with autistic kids. Talking to Diane, talking to the person, Kai, who does the podcast. If you're at all interested in that podcast at all, definitely go to Paranormal Daily News. Right now, it is the kind of lead article you'll see at the top of the screen of the landing page. And absolutely take a look at that. And I'm not quite sure what all of a sudden happened with my image. I seem to have fuzzed out a little bit at this point. Not sure why that's actually happening. In any event, I'll just be Fuzzy Lloyd for a little bit. Definitely take a look at and explore Paranormal Daily News. There'll be a lot more coming. Jock is trying to pin me down to writing some articles for it as well. So definitely take a look there. The other thing I wanted to mention up front, for those of you who might be Star Trek fans, I just discovered something this past week, and I was totally blown away by this particular project. It's a little behind schedule, but if you are a Star Trek fan and have ever wanted to walk through the Enterprise, like the original Enterprise, there is a project going on, which I joined for free. Got a really cool, nifty little membership card as well. Here's the membership card, nice plastic membership card. And it's called the Enterprise Project. And it's a group that has formed to actually, the goal of which is to raise funds and build sort of a mini theme park. But the centerpiece of that will be a full-scale replica of the USS Enterprise 1701, the original Enterprise. I don't even know how I could have possibly missed that as a Star Trek fan. It's not been discussed anywhere, and I'm going to try to help spread the word on that. So if you're a Star Trek fan, definitely check that out. The plan is incredible. Desi Duratum, an open access journal, sounds brilliant. Figshare may be a good option. Actually, I think that Jock Brokus has the platform all figured out, all of that for the journal. So, and he's already on a platform. And he's actually an IP guy, IT guy rather, in the back end. So he hosts a lot of other stuff as well. So I think that he may have that already figured out, but I'll mention that to him next time I talk to him. The nice thing about having an open access journal, or even just having Paranormal Daily News before the journal even comes out, is that there's opportunity for people to submit things and have them published on that website. So in the various, paranormal and other type of realms as well. So I strongly suggest that you folks check it out and maybe connect with Jock, but definitely read Craig's article and some of the other articles Craig's written. For those of you who don't know the name Craig Weiler, he has been around parapsychology for a number of years. He is a science journalist. He wrote a book called Psi Wars, PSI, as Psi Wars, looking directly and taking a deep dive into Wikipedia's war against parapsychology, because it is highly biased against our field and others. Wikipedia is also very biased against the UFO community, biased against alternative health, and all sorts of things. So anyway, take a look there at Craig's other material too. Lucas, do you know any good quality research on astrology, personal opinions on the subject? Well, there is something new called vibrational. I think it's vibrational astrology. I'll have to take a look at it. A buddy of mine who is very, very down to earth. Actually, he's been a coach for corporations for quite some time, and he got involved in it a couple of years ago. We had a talk about it last year. He's put up, I think, a talk on artisantarot.com. Yeah, let me just go ahead and find Mike here. So it is, and he's got actually a newsletter he puts out, and it's a little bit different than what you'd think normal astrology is, very mathematically based and such. And it seems, when you predict the future for human beings, it's always kind of a crapshoot, because we make decisions and we change things all the time. I have met and I've known astrologers in the past who are not using the charts the way that you think they are. They happen to be very psychic. And this goes for tarot card readers. This goes for anybody doing divination techniques, that very often it's not the item that they're using or the tool that they're using. They're using that, whether they realize it or not, as a starting point for their own psychic abilities. So they're being psychic. The good news for them, it seems, it's actually why some people who are very psychic prefer to use stuff like that, is because if anything bothers the client, if it's bad news you're delivering, you can always blame it on the cards or the stars. It's not your fault as the psychic, it's the stuff. But anybody who predicts the future, anyone who's doing any of that, can only give you trends. They cannot give you specifics, unless they happen to be highly precognitive and very targeted. So that's kind of my feeling about that. Most astrology, I used to dabble in it when I was a teenager, doing charts for people and stuff. It's interesting. I mean, there's some really interesting things from a psychological personality perspective, but it's not necessarily the best way to, unless you're really dealing with somebody who knows what they're doing. Any predictions about the future, it's the same with any good psychic. You can't really get anything more than probable futures there. Okay, Paul, have you read the new book, What Lies Beyond by Matt Colborn? No, I have not. His name was just mentioned to me this week, I think, by one of my students. So I'll have to look into that one. I do have Immortal Minds on pre-order from Amazon. I guess I'll be getting it this week. Yes, Wikipedia has the Guerrilla Skeptics, and it's GUE, like in guerrilla warfare, and there's a bias, there's a definite bias, but it's not just them. The folks who run Wikipedia, it's been very clear since well over a decade, and Craig kind of details this in his book Sci Wars, very clear that they are disbelievers. Um, it got to the point where Charles Tart, who just passed away not too long ago, major name in psychology in the realm of altered states of consciousness going back to the 1960s, but heavily involved in parapsychology. And he did his bio. He put his bio up on Wikipedia, and he checked, I don't remember how long after he put his bio up, and all references to his parapsychology work have been removed. And he tried to put it back in, and same thing, was removed again. And he tried to get that fixed, and he was kicked off. He wasn't allowed to edit his own thing anymore. If that's not bias, I don't know what is. So that happens. Okay. And I'll tell you honestly, I'm looking at Desi Rodham's comment. It's smart. I'll tell you where Wikipedia shines. I think it's really good for stuff about movies and TV and literary history and that kind of things. It seems to be really good for that. I worked for Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in the library back in the teens, actually in the late aughts, so from about 2008 to 2012. And I talked to some physicists who told me that, because they have a huge physics department covering a lot of areas of physics, and he told me that for Wikipedia, they would rotate in the departments on who would go into their specific specialty in let's say it's quantum physics, and review what the week's version of the entry in Wikipedia was, and more often than not have to correct it because somebody went in and edited it, and it was made incorrect, misinformation. So that happened. A lot of teachers have told their students not to do Wikipedia because, again, there's a lot of bad information. It's a reflection of the internet in some respects. It's better than the internet in general, but it's not that much better. But there are some subjects. But your last statement there, Desi Rodham, call a librarian. Absolutely. Do call a librarian. Have a reference librarian at your local library help you out. If you're in a corporation, have your corporate librarian help you out. But definitely work with librarians. They are masters of information. They are information professionals. Okay. Paul, you remember when they banned Rupert Sheldrake on TED Talks? Well, that TED Talks is not Wikipedia. They have their own biases, but they have loosened up a little bit over the years. There have been some occasional TED Talks that are right on point. Yeah, Charlie Tart was. I was so honored to have known him, and to have had him invite me to have lunch with him in North Berkeley every so often. Charlie was a great guy, great sense of humor. Really, really someone I got to know early on in my career, and very fortunate to have known him till not too long before he died. So he really, really great post-materialist thinker. Absolutely there for that. Okay, Peter Fenwick. I didn't know Peter Fenwick at all. Oddly enough, I last week got an invite on Facebook to be friends with Peter Fenwick. Clearly, somebody has hacked this, has spoofed his site. I sent back a note saying, "Aren't you dead?" Haven't heard from the person at all since then. I guess that's not to say that somebody who's dead can't use Facebook, but it's unlikely Peter Fenwick, deceased, would have actually tried to friend me at this point. And yes, Bill Bankston did just pass very recently as well. Susanna, good to see you here. Anytime I've used Wikipedia to cite something, it's not accepted. So one of the nice things about Wikipedia, though, is if you look in the footnotes for any entry, you can then check the supposed originating article. And until they start using AI, they're actually using real articles. So I've seen really bad entries, but gotten something out of the footnotes, even on the really bad entries. Just something to think about. It does actually have some uses. And again, I've used it for looking up stuff on like an episode list of a TV series, or something to that effect. Um, of course, one of the things, if you're really interested in this in a subject that we talk about here, the thing to do is to go to the Science Encyclopedia. It's not complete yet; it's still evolving, but that's put together by the Society for Psychical Research, and it has in-depth articles on all sorts of stuff and all sorts of people in our field. I even have an entry. Not long enough as far as I'm concerned, but it's still, so I have an entry. Let's see here. Doesn't have to be local. You're in Berkeley, and Dr. Irving Finkel at the British Library. Okay, call him. I think, honestly, First Ghost is an amazing book. For those of you who don't know that book by Irving Finkel, it's an amazing book going back to the Mesopotamians and talking about ghost stories and kind of various ideas that we talk about in parapsychology all the time. So I would love to, I've heard a lecture by him. I'd love to talk to him. But yeah, you can contact people. This is the thing that I think most people don't understand is unless you are coming across, frankly, as psychologically disturbed or someone who is asking for psychological help, that's something a little more difficult. But if you're asking for information and for sources and for people to give you to answer some questions or point you, what you want is people to point you in the right direction. It's important to know that for a lot of academics you contact, you may not get a lengthy answer, but they will very often, myself included, I can't spend all my days. I get a lot of inquiries from people. I will copy and paste from stuff that I've already written or send them to various resources like the Science Encyclopedia. So I can't always answer in depth all the questions I get, but my personal experience, even as a student way back when, both a college student and a graduate student, is that people in academia are, as long as you're not contacting a total disbeliever who's going to give you a completely different answer, if you're asking questions about psychic things, about the paranormal, just know who they are. Research who the person is you want to contact. Don't just pick a name out of the hat or off the internet and contact them. Know what their works are, know what and their position is, and ask questions accordingly. Ask for resources accordingly. Just really, really helpful. People are really good about that. Okay. The first book you read, The Ghost Hunter's Guide, Paul. Yeah. So for those who don't know the name Peter Underwood, Peter Underwood was a mainstay of the London Ghost Club, which is still in existence, the Ghost Club. It wasn't continuous. It wasn't active continuously since its founding. It was founded earlier than the Society for Psychical Research, I think in the 1850s. And early members of the London Ghost Club included Charles Dickens, who did ghost investigations, and Sam Clemens, Mark Twain. Both were members of the SPR as well. Underwood was a very prolific writer. Wrote a lot of books about different parts of haunted England and Wales and Scotland and places like that. But also wrote some really good books on life after death. The Ghost Hunter's Guide is a really good basic guide to doing investigations without all the tech that you don't really need. And what I was so pleased to see a couple of years ago was that either someone in the family or someone who's gotten the rights to his books has been putting them up as ebooks on Amazon for anywhere from $1.99 to $3.99. So really reasonably priced. The Ghost Hunter's Guide is there. I think the Ghost Hunter's Guide you can also buy in paperback, but really worth looking at his work because he was a good storyteller and a good writer, and from what I understand, he was a good investigator as well. So definitely, I actually have the Ghost Hunter's Guide. I have a hardcover, a paperback, and I bought the ebook as well. And I've bought some of his other ebooks too. Okay, let's see. Ask good questions about the topics of which they are knowledgeable and being extremely polite, especially if they're British. Yes, I would absolutely agree with that, Desideratum. And, definitely be polite and respectful of anyone you contact. I've had people Usually they tend to be people who are either true believers or true disbelievers, send me email and demand that I spend time answering like a list of questions. You have to do this. It's like, yeah, I don't have to do that. And it would have been nice if you said please. So always important to ask to really be respectful to people you contact. And also, for some of you may know this, but I mean, I've been a public speaking coach over the years. Taught public speaking as one of the modules in a class I taught at John F. Kennedy University for many years. And I'm even quoted in the first couple of editions of Public Speaking for Dummies. So one of the things that's really important to know is if somebody asks you a question, if you don't know the answer should be, I don't know, but I'll try to find out. Or I don't know the answer to that, but you should contact so and so, or read or go to this website. In other words, know what resources are out there, know what other stuff is out there. You can always recommend a book to somebody, somebody else to contact, somebody's website. Just know that there are resources. You don't have to know everything. Nobody knows everything. It seems like some people in the paranormal world seem to put that out there and seem to answer even if they don't have a clue to the answer. But it's really important. You actually get more credibility by recognizing you don't know something and being honest to your audience for something. So that's important. You may get surprised. I mean, I also get questions like, what do you think of Waverly Hills Asylum? It's like, I don't know. I've never been there. And I'm not going to go by what I see on TV. And they're shocked that I've not been there. They're shocked that I haven't investigated the Stanley Hotel or other places. Well, I don't have an unlimited travel budget. I have to work. So it's important to be honest about those kinds of things. Paul, I do have some interviews that are coming up. I'll try to get the link and post it on my website. So my website, lloydauerbach.com, I have a page of media, and I have a few things coming up. I haven't gotten the links yet for them. I'm going to be on supernatural circumstances. I think it's going to be a week from tomorrow. I think that's what Morgan Knudsen said. I actually co-hosted that, and we did an interview with Craig Weiler about the telepathy tapes. So that's coming up. I often get pre-recorded. I did an interview with Rob and Trish McGregor, and I have to find out. They haven't told me yet when it's going to air, but had a real fun interview with them recently. And the great thing about them, well, I mean, I knew Rob's work because he's a fiction writer as well as a nonfiction writer, and he wrote several Indiana Jones novels way back when, and actually knew my buddy Martin Caden, so we talked about him a bit. So there's stuff coming up. I'll try to get those as soon as I get the links. I'll post them. Why are from Jody? Yeah, I'm happy to add to everybody's never-ending reading list. You know, these are not the only books that I have. I've got 5 bookcases full, plus stuff piled to the ceiling, plus stuff in bookcase in my closet. And I'm actually just got an app for my phone to start cataloging everything. It's going to take me many days to do that. All right, Susanna, why are most of the books published these days printed in such tiny font like a warning label? And it depends on who's publishing it, self-publishing. Sometimes it is something that happened with the process of self-publishing on Kindle Direct or some other publisher. I've actually gotten books where the text is way too big. It's almost as if they're publishing a large format, large letter format. And I don't know why it's large letter format, because it doesn't need to be. But I suspect it's because they're padding the number of pages to sell it for a higher price. One of the things that does happen if you're self-publishing or publishing in general is that the smaller the font, the fewer the pages. So if you're self-publishing, that book is going to cost you, the author, less money to buy copies. Not by enough, though. So, it just really depends. Do I have any advice on grieving? Yeah, there is a deck there's a couple of things. I've got it right here. All right, so there is a workbook which you can buy from Amazon. It is provided actually to our attendees at the grief retreats for the Forever Family Foundation. It's this book called Love Knows No Death, and it is the author. I'm going to put it up here so you can just kind of see the author's name, Piero Parasetti. Okay, so I'll just hold that up. It is a workbook, and it has links in it to free videos that go along with the workbook. It is an exceptional, it's been tested, I can't say clinically per se, but it's gone through a lot of testing over the years, over the last few years. It is an incredibly useful tool for grieving. The other thing is that Julie Beischel at the Windbridge Research Center, windbridge.org, put out a grieving deck. So it's a deck of grief-related cards, how to work through your grief. I don't recall the title off the top of my head. Let me see if I can actually find it. It's called Guidance for Grief. That's the name of the deck of cards. It's like $13 and change. And it is really it's a good set of cards. I bought a copy for just to support Windbridge. And not that I'm grieving for anything, but it's a really good way of going. But this workbook is absolutely, people have been raving about it who come to our grief retreats. So I really highly recommend that. And Desideradum, you're very welcome. You know, I've been an educator, and my whole mission in life has been to get good information about parapsychology out to the public since I first got into the field. My first job was doing that at the ASPR in New York. So really happy to continue doing this as long as I can. And also the Astonishing Legends podcast did a great multi-part on Waverly. They had some interesting experience with non-human entities. Non-human entities are kind of a thing that, you know, we have to wonder about. That's a whole different story. There's no way to prove that they exist. We have a hard enough time proving that dead people exist and communicate. All right. What do you think of I am not familiar with Tesla's spirit device. I didn't know. I know Tesla was interested, but I don't know what device Tesla had put forth or built. You know, of course, Edison had his own attempts at trying to create a connection with the dead, but I was unaware of Tesla's stuff. So I'll have to look into that. See what we actually have for that. All right. Since I mentioned the Forever Family Foundation, for those of you that may not know, the link is in the channel description. The Forever Family Foundation it's foreverfamilyfoundation.org, just like it sounds. And it is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, all volunteer, nobody gets paid. And there's several things that the organization actually did and does. One is we put on I'm president of the organization as it happens. We put on several grief retreats, one in California, one in Florida, and two in Connecticut at the moment. And the grief retreats, actually, they're called grief transformation retreats. They include several of our certified mediums and a grief counselor who does a presentation, usually some presentations on the evidence for survival of bodily death from a parapsychology perspective as well. You can join it for free. The organization does certify mediums. There's a testing process that was developed with the help of several scientists, including Gary Schwartz and Julie Beischel years ago, that's out there. And we run folks through that who apply. When they apply, they also have to do an interview with one of our mediumship board members, because we need to know their ethics. We need to know their perspective, and that they're not just trying to get certified to make money, you know, to use that as a promotion. In fact, anyone who's a certified medium in the organization must volunteer for something at their own expense, typically, depending if it's local, or we will fly them to a grief retreat if we need to do that. But they have to they have to volunteer their time and effort, even in a role that might not be mediumship, at least once a year. Otherwise, if they don't do that, their certification gets pulled. Also, what's interesting about the certification is that only about 10% of the people pass the first time. The folks who are really interested will do it again. In fact, some people have done it 3 times, including a couple of well-known mediums for that matter. And one of them is with us. Catherine Nadal is one of the Forever Family Foundation mediums, in fact. And one of our great mediums. Kathy is a great medium, actually, in the New York area. The other thing the foundation does is supports dissemination of information on scientific research on life after death and the evidence that is there, and of course supporting people in grief as well. The organization was founded to work with mediums in the family grieving process. That was the purpose of the organization. Okay, let's see here. The other organization I'm connected to that most of you know is, of course, the Rhine Research Center. And the Rhine Research Center, in its 90th anniversary year, it's the anniversary year of the 90th for the Rhine Research Center, for the Duke Parapsychology Lab, which was founded in 1935. And I'm going to tell you about what's coming up this month, actually, in June. So we have a speaker coming up. Stephen Schwartz will be talking about precognitive remote viewing and our future on Friday the 13th at 7 p.m. Eastern, so 4 p.m. Pacific. It is free. It's on the web. It's an online thing. We do hope that people will donate something or join the Rhine, one or the other. We have some other things. We have occasional daytime meetings. So Jack Glazier from the University of West Georgia is going to be meeting with folks at the Rhine, and that'll be online as well on June 25th. Jim Carpenter will be speaking on July 11th. That's Friday, July 11th at 7 p.m. Eastern. And he'll be talking about his first sight theory of psi, of ESP. He wrote a lengthy book about that and wrote several papers. And Jim is a clinician who works with people, psychologists, but he also has been a researcher for many, many years. And his first sight theory just hits you right. I mean, when you hear him talking about it or read about it, it's like, yeah, well, duh. But he's kind of expanded on that quite a bit. There's also a new Rhine YouTube channel. So if you put in Rhine Research Center into YouTube, part of it, there is, within that, there is part of it that says simply Rhine at 90. And there's a lecture from Joe McMoneagle, who was the #1 remote viewer. If you're interested in remote viewing, you should definitely go back and watch that one from last month. If you are interested in what the Rhine has been doing and the history and my connection to the Rhine and John Kruth, the executive director's connection to the Rhine, we did a kind of a back and forth conversation a couple of months ago that's also in that particular channel. So if you're interested in parapsychology at all from a scientific perspective, which includes all this stuff that I've been talking about, check it out. And, check the Rhine. There's a link to the Rhine, again, within the channel. All right, so Kathleen said, I saw a post earlier, Chip Coffey had a vision dream with Lorraine Warren. It'll be interesting to hear what that was about when he's ready to discuss it. Sure will. Chip Coffey, who apparently was a child actor, and at one point was on my uncle's soap opera, Love of Life. I know that because Chip came up to me after I mentioned my uncle's name as the director of soaps, and he told me he met my uncle when he was a kid. So just throwing that out there. All right. I don't know I don't know if anybody would really want to hear from Lorraine Warren, but that's a whole different story. Okay. Anybody have anything else? I mean, I don't want to have a lull here in this, but again, it's not a bad idea to have that. Trying to think if there's anything I can kind of throw at you right now. Actually, I will mention a couple of, since we've talked about reading here, a couple of books. One of which is new. The other I didn't know existed, but is really, really cool. So first, there is this book. This is the one that's not new. It's called N equals 1. It's translated from German, and it's a book of case studies. And it's got some really cool cases of poltergeist activity. There's a cryptozoology and crop circle research case, UFO research. There's a bunch of really good things in here in this particular book. Um, Anomalistic photography and a haunting myth, just dead monks walking. That's the title of one of the articles by various folks. Very approachable, very readable. It's a really, really good book. I happened upon it by accident and immediately purchased it. Gerhard Mayer is with the Institute for Frontier Areas of Psychology and Mental Health and a parapsychological institute, and he's one of the hosts of the Parapsychological Association convention coming up in July in Freiburg, Germany. So if you want to go to Freiburg, Germany, you can go to the Parapsychological Association's website and learn about the convention. It's parapsych.org. Also in the channel description is a link. The other one for our folks interested in the afterlife is a really good discussion by a philosophy professor who has written books on life after death, near-death experiences, and about how we've had to deal with the skeptics over the years. This book is called The Case for the Afterlife by Chris Carter. Just came out a couple months ago. It summarizes the evidence for life after death and the assessment of that. It's got a great bibliography in it. And Carter is a great writer. I use his name quite a bit in talking about when I'm doing my normal job, which is LexisNexis, because sometimes I work with librarians, as it happens, who have to do research for attorneys, and they're often kind of popping in names of people in the news. We have LexisNexis is a huge news database. And I use Chris Carter's name as part of the example of how to do a good search, because there are 4 Chris Carters that are out there. 3 of whom are connected to this subject in some way, shape, or form. There's Chris Carter, the parapsychology author and parapsychologist. There is Chris Carter, who is the creator of the X-Files, no relation. There is Chris Carter, who is a professional mentalist and fellow member of the Psychic Entertainers Association. And not too long ago, I discovered Chris Carter, the mystery writer, who's none of the other 3. So if you ever search for people with common names on the internet, always remember to add in their specialty. Otherwise, you might get the wrong one easily or get too many of them. Just imagine searching for somebody named John Smith or Jane Smith. All right, Paul, yeah, glad you enjoyed that. When I teach the survival class next, the human personality, the human survival class next year, I will be definitely using that book as one of the main texts. Highly recommended. Now, the odd thing, Jody, is that I've met the Chris Carter from the X-Files. I was actually at a conference back in the early 90s, and he was the keynote speaker. It was a Mensa conference that I was speaking at, and we chatted for a bit. So I actually know, I've not ever met Chris Carter, the parapsychologist, but I've corresponded with him on email. I know Chris Carter, the mentalist. I do not know Chris Carter, the mystery writer. So first book I mentioned, N equals 1. Here it is again. By Gerhard Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R. So, yeah, if anybody's ever looking for a recommendation for a book or books, feel free to email me, or you can ask here, and I can always kind of pop up and pull something off the shelves that are back there. I don't have everything behind me. I mean, most of the books that you see that are back here with all the tarot cards and stuff in front are antiquarian books or older books from the early days of psychical research or the early 20th century as well. Back in the early 2000s when eBay started up, I was able to buy a bunch of them at a reasonable price. Now they're much, much, much more expensive. Although, as I learned later on, when I would sometimes be in a bidding war with somebody else, it turned out I was in a bidding war with a friend of mine. We were both using, he had no idea I was bidding on the same book, and yeah, that was a very, very bizarre thing in some respects. All right. Also, there are downloadable resources you can find in the channel discussion. So there's some stuff that's there. I have a resource list of other places to go if you haven't found that yet. Uh, and just trying to think if there's any other particular new book. Because usually I have my new books over here. Um, you know, I think I should mention. I don't have the books in front of me, but I will mention some really interesting thing that has come up. Yeah, interlibrary loan is good. Um, and of course, if you're looking for the old books, the antiquarian books, you don't have to actually pay for them because there is the Internet Archive. Many of the books you see on the shelves behind me are out of copyright. So they've been scanned, they're on the Internet Archive. If you're unfamiliar with the Internet Archive, it's archive.org. If you want to find a treasure trove of older information, especially in this subject, back to the beginning, that's the place to go. But also some more recent stuff is there too. Um, so I thought I should mention something I've been talking about in one of my classes. In fact, I've mentioned this a couple times in this one particular class. Did you know that the term ghost hunting or ghost hunter goes back to at least, and it looks like we're having some issues, internet issues, but the term ghost hunter goes back at least to the 1790s and may go back further than that, which is really an interesting thing when first of all, there was a very famous person popularizing the word ghost hunter or the phrase ghost hunter in the 60s, and that was Hans Holzer. Before him was Harry Price. There is a book you can find on the Internet Archive called Historic Ghosts and Ghost Hunters, which was from the early 20th century. And I've heard people related to the TV shows make statements that they came up with, or the TV shows came up with the term ghost hunters, which is, now about 200 years off, expressing their ignorance. So there is a folklorist named Tim Prassel. I'm going to put his name in here. Look him up on Amazon. He wrote two books. One is a casebook of Victorian ghost hunting rather. So he wrote a book that found reports and investigations in the pre-SPR, so the Victorian era. Really cool book. He's a folklorist. He also published a subsequent book, and the title escapes me right now, of pre-Victorian, so like going back even further. And he has been looking, if you go to his blog, which is Brom Bones Books, he has a blog. He has some information, kind of historical information, kind of a Ghost Hunters Hall of Fame as well, with some of the older ghost hunters that are out there. And his two books are just really fascinating. He also put out a book, which I do have here, for folks who want to just see what did people think about ghosts back in the 1800s and places like that. This is called Spectral Edition. And it is ghost reports from 1865 to 1917 in U.S. newspapers, because newspapers actually publish ghost reports. So take a look at his stuff. He's got the fact that he has been digging into English literature and also into U.S. literature pre-1800 now, trying to find first uses of things. All right, let's see here. What did you think of the vertical plane? I haven't really dug into it at this point, not yet. Had some other things come up in the last couple of weeks that kind of took me away from doing almost anything, unfortunately. Did you ever eat at the Francis Tavern? Yeah. When did I do that? God. There were a couple of the old taverns in New York City that I did visit. Certain nocturnal disturbances. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Susanna. But yeah, it's too bad. Let's see. Yeah, they go back. There's a couple of different other places, including places that are supposedly haunted in New York City. What's the White Horse Tavern, I think it is, in New York. They go 100s, and definitely go back to George Washington, so to his days. Having grown up, I mean, you know, Kathy, being in Yonkers in that area, I grew up in Elmsford, New York, near Tarrytown, you know, Sleepy Hollow territory, and we learned a lot about the Revolutionary War and some of the people back then, and even some of the ghost stories from that time. Um, Sunnyside, which is Washington Irving's home, is, I don't know if it's still reputed to be haunted, but I remember going there as a teenager and people in the staff were talking about it being haunted. So having experiences there. Okay. So hopefully, I'm not sure. I keep seeing some kind of glitches with the internet. I'm hoping everything is working okay at this point. It seems to be coming through okay, but hard to say. So, you know, back to folklore, I just want to say that, you know, there's a lot of good folklore, but some people like Prassel have done a great job at pulling stuff together. There's another book simply called Ghosts in Print, which I recommend, which is a much bigger book of, again, newspaper accounts going way back. And if you like little ghost stories and you want to know, again, how people thought about it, some of the headlines are pretty funny. Some of them, yeah, not so funny. You know, murdered girl's ghost haunts parents' home. That's in a newspaper. There, but there's some really great stuff with these books that I can recommend. Paul, you want to do a haunted tour? Um, you know, maybe Paul, if you drove by Resurrection Cemetery, I can't recall where it is people have reportedly picked up Resurrection Mary, but I don't know how much she's seen in the cemetery. My understanding when I lived in Evanston for Northwestern was that people picked her. She was a hitchhiking ghost. And yeah, Chicago's got a lot of stories. Troy Taylor's written a book on Chicago ghost stories. Um, but there's Ursula Bielski has written stuff on Chicago haunts. There's a lot of really good stories there as well. I mean, there's a lot of good stories in New York City as well. Um, it's just sometimes you have to really kind of parse through the actual stories. I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm just hoping that the glitches that I'm seeing are not bothering people too much. Anyway, for those of you that, yeah, it's buffering. I'm glad you don't lose any of the commentary. That's good. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's doing that because my connection to the streaming service is not buffering. So something's going on there. Yeah, Archer Avenue. It's been a long time since I actually spent time in downtown Chicago and for the purposes of looking for anything. Port Townsend, yes, Port Townsend, Washington State. Got lots of good haunted stuff there. So, you know, you can find things just about everywhere. The thing that always gets me is how so many cities claim to be the most haunted. I know Savannah, Georgia claims that. I know it's pretty active, but um, I know when somebody tells me it's the most haunted, like the Whaley House Museum down in San Diego has a big sign that it's the most haunted house in America. How do they know? I mean, have they kind of looked at other haunted places that are very active? How does it compare? That kind of thing. I think it's okay to do that just for marketing purposes, but um, you always have to kind of look through the hype. And that certainly goes through a lot of the paranormal tourist traps that are now out there. It's one of the things that has come up because of the TV shows, of course, is a lot of historical places have now been able to make money, encouraging visitors and fix themselves up. And I think that's a really good thing, even if the ghost story is not real. As long as they talk about the actual history, I think that's a positive. But the problem is that there's often a lot of folklore and stories. I mean, the Winchester Mystery House is a great example of folklore over actuality. Um, for a long time, the management was encouraging the docents to tell ghost stories, whatever they wanted to say. And then they can do it again. And of course, they're making a little extra money with flashlight tours and all sorts of things. Clearly there is a connection to spiritualism at the Winchester House because Sarah Winchester had seances, but the ghost story, there's one guy. Maybe Sarah pops in. From what I understand, Sarah might pop in once in a while, but the handyman Clyde was seen by has for years has been seen by maintenance, security, off hours, not the typical thing. So St. Augustine, Florida, I've heard great things about it. One of my former students actually lives there and has done a lot there. A lot of haunted activity there for sure. Susanna lives in Port Townsend. I know that. We went there with you, in fact. Um, Mary Prankster. Yeah, definitely pick up Piero Piero Parasetti's book, The Love Knows No Death. It is, and the videos that are there are going to help you a lot. But in the short term, you also might pick up that grief deck that Julie Beischel put out. And really sorry for your loss. Yeah, it's been a year. I know I've lost a few colleagues this past year, so it can be tough. And I've participated in some of our grief retreats. I will say that a good medium who knows how to work with people, and I say this because I've seen it happen, how a good medium and the information about evidence for life after death can truly help. The reason the foundation, the Forever Family Foundation, calls these grief transformation retreats is because when people come in, it's very clear they're grieving. What's really interesting, one of the things I noticed at the last retreat that I attended in October was the first dinner on the first night. The folks at the foundation have a table of their own, but people are sitting at other tables. It's quiet. People aren't talking. It's just like very, very somber. But over the 2 days, it gets noisier and noisier and noisier. In fact, I suggested to Bob Ginsberg, who's vice president, and Lee Harris, who's the executive director, that maybe we need a sound meter and to gauge the actual decibel level as a gauge of how much things get transformed. Because people not only end up talking with each other, which helps talking it with people who have similar experiences, but what they've gained from the mediumship and the evidence presentations makes them, does transform their grief. That's really a really amazing thing to actually watch. So it does help to talk to people. If you want to see a good medium, then I recommend going to the Forever Family Foundation website, and looking at the list of go to mediumship tab and look at the list of certified mediums. Catherine Nadal is one of them, but there are others as well who are very good, and they will help you as well. Okay, let's see. We've got just a few minutes left. All right, I'm being told by my producer there's something going on with a local server on his end, a town over from him. So as long as things are buffering and you can watch the whole thing, I'm really glad that is the case, not missing anything. New Orleans. Yeah, New Orleans. That's one of my favorite places to go, just in general. I'm going to go back to Jody's questions in a moment. But I love New Orleans. I've only been there a few times, and I really love it. I recommend Bloody Mary's tours. My friend Mary, who's goes by Bloody Mary, she's got her own shop and does some great ghost stuff. So I do recommend stuff. But yeah, between the voodoo and the ghost things, it's a really cool place to be. All right, Jody, what's your opinion of ghost hunters buying historical places and charging for investigations? Well, okay. That happened with the Whaley House, actually. I think that, and this goes to charging for investigations in general. If they are otherwise open, they're buying a historical place, they're fixing it up, they're keeping it up, it's an upkeep thing. Given that historic sites have often fallen by the wayside because they weren't getting donations, they weren't able to do the upkeep. In fact, the group that bought the Whaley House, apparently the Historical Society had to offload it because they didn't have any money. So this group has fixed it up. As long as they have the real history of the place as at least part of what they do, I think that charging for, let's say, a late night investigation is appropriate. Now, I don't. It just depends, of course, on how much they're charging. The USS for a while, the organization. You go over to the Hornet during the daytime, you can probably find one of the docents to take you on a Hornet tour for the same price you come in the Hornet for anything else. If they do an evening thing, they are going to charge more, and they are going to charge more for a number of reasons. Number one, they have to pay security people to stick around. They can't lock up the ship. Number two, there may be insurance issues that they have to pay for, and they may have to pay others as well. So you have to look at, somebody buys a historic location, and again, as long as they keep the history part of it upkeep, because that's an upkeep, and keep the place going, and don't rig it with all sorts of ghostly manifestations to make the people think they're getting their money's worth. And they have people who can talk about the actual history. I don't see a problem with them charging for a late night or a special investigation. You go to any place, and let's say you want to rent out a historic place, and you want to just for a business meeting or a luncheon or something like that, even one based on history, they're going to charge you for that. For a number, you go to a hotel, go to the Stanley Hotel, out the ballroom for something. They're going to charge you for that. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a wedding or a ghost investigation, they're going to charge you for that. So they have upkeep, they have people to pay. That's appropriate. Okay. And let's see if there's anything else before we finish up here. Desiderata maybe having strong. Oh, interesting. Yeah, maybe that's a disrupting factor. Maybe not. But, you never know with things these days in general. Maybe it's AI kind of like trying to come in here and do something. All right. Oh, cool. You're going to see the aurora. That's really cool, Susanna. Yeah, there's been a lot of solar activity kind of coming and going, and that does disrupt communications in certain ways. Wow, my screen just went blank for a moment. That was as I'm talking about solar disruption. Isn't that weird? Okay. So I hope folks come back in a couple of weeks. Think of questions for me and bring them back. Tell your friends. Make sure you like and subscribe if you have not already done so. But feel free to copy the link for this show or any of the other ones. Remember, there are older ones. This is episode 49. I've done this for quite a while. Take a look absolutely go to the Rhine Center's website and take a look at the upcoming events. Go to the YouTube channel. You'll find, like I said, Joe McMonagle's lecture, which was great. You want to know about real remote viewing and the fact that you don't have to spend thousands of dollars to learn it? Listen to that lecture, or at the very least, pick up the Kindle edition of Joe's book, Remote Viewing Secrets, which is $4.99. You can get the paperback if you want for a little bit more, but you want to learn the basics, that's an easy way to do it. Glad you all came. Thanks again for joining us this week. Back on the 15th of June, 29th of June, and then we'll go into and we are going to be every other week through the summer at least, and probably through the end of the year as I can. All right. Take care, everybody, and I hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Good night. Of course, now it clears up. Yeah.